All right, part 2 of the inventory module tutorial. Welcome back. In this one, I'm going to show you how to add the equipment panel and make it so you can equip stuff. So let's say I have a tree and this tree only goes in the helmet. And the brick is a weapon, so I can equip it there. And I can use something else like the crystal is a weapon too, but they can't go in the other slots. But this is editable and you can set anything you want. And the other thing is the draggable windows. So I can drag around any windows that I have here. And there's a safe zone so you can't lose the window outside. And there's also a scale. So if your UI is too small, you can scale it, make it bigger. Or if you like small UI to be able to see more of your game, then you can do that and place your UI accordingly. So yeah, that's going to be what I'm going to show you today. All right, let's jump in. So I'm going to start from where I left off in the last tutorial. So if you want to follow along, you can get the files on GitHub. I'm going to have a link in the description. And I'm going to have also the GitHub for the completed part 2. All right, so I'm going to start with the scalable UI. What I'm going to do here, I'm going to clean a bit. So I'm going to have a folder for scenes. And I'm going to transfer my main scene in there. And I'm going to have a folder for my UI. And inventory player, I'm going to put it in inventory. And then UI. So here, I'm going to create a new script. For the template, I'm going to do no comments. This script will be called scale control. And it's going to inherit from control and create. So I'm going to extend the control node to make it scalable. So open that script. And here, I'm going to add the class name, scale control. So then in my UI, when I want to use a scalable control, I can simply use that instead of the normal control. All right, so the variable I'm going to need is the scale, which is going to be a float. I'm going to have one function, which is going to be set scale. Function set scale, which is going to take a value. So when I get the scale, I'm going to set it and apply it to the control. Rect scale is equal to, and this is taking a vector2, scale, and scale. So to set the scale now, we're going to listen to a signal from the signal manager, connect. So I'm going to have a new signal. Let's call it UI scale change. We'll connect it to self, and it will execute on UI scale change. And then at the bottom, I can add this function, which is going to receive a value. We only need to set the scale. So now let's create this signal in the signal manager. So I can hold control and click signal manager. It's going to bring me in the class. Here I can add signal UI scale change. This is for the inventory, and this is going to be for the UI. All right, so now UI scale change, where should we call that? For now, we could do some simple button to test and see if it works. So I'm going to go in my inventory player, and here I'm going to extend my new class, so scale control, and save that. So let's go in my main view. Okay, so I added a 3 button. So I have scale 0.5, scale 1, and scale 1.5. I made a test script. It's simply a small test. I'm going to export a scale. And when you click the button, you're going to call the signal manager UI scale change with the scale of the button. So in my editor here, I set my scale 0.5 in the inspector, scale 0.5, and 1.5. So now, if I test that, I only applied the scale control on the player inventory. So if I start and I try 0.5, the inventory of the player is scaled down. I can put it back to 1 and 1.5. All right, so now that we know that this works, we're going to do a setting window so we can have finer control on the scale of the UI. All right, so I'm going to remove my button and the scale test script. I don't need it anymore. Before doing the setting UI, I'm going to do a setting manager. So if I go in my managers, I'm going to create a new script, settings manager, no comment, and everything is all right. So create that. So this one will be used for the settings of the game. And since settings are used throughout the whole game, it can be okay to have it as a singleton, so a auto load script. In here, the 2 settings I'm going to use is full screen, var full screen. I'm going to have a set get function, mostly the set function. It's going to take in a value, and then we'll have the scale. So var scale and set scale function set scale. Again, it will take a value. So for now, we'll set the initial value. So scale will always be 1, and full screen is going to be equal to the current settings of the full screen. So we'll do os.window full screen. So if in your settings you set it so the game starts full screen, it will set it to true. And maybe later in another part, I could save the setting. So if you set your scale and your full screen, when you start the game again, it could load those settings. For the full screen here, when you have a setter, you need to set the variable. So full screen is equal to value. Then we need to set the full screen of the game. So OS window full screen is equal to value also. And then we set the scale. The scale will be equal to value. And then from here, we can call the UI scale change. So signal manager, emit signal, UI scale change, and we send the value. That's pretty much it for the setting manager. So let's save that. And let's put this script in the auto load. So project settings, auto load tab, and path here. I'm going to click the folder. It's in my manager folder, setting manager, open, and it's going to propose the name settings manager. All right, and add. So it's good, close. So now let's start with the setting window. Let's go back here. All right, so I'm going to create a new user interface. And I'm going to change the type for the 9-patch rec. Oh yeah, here what I could do instead of doing it all from scratch, I can simply merge from scene and go in my inventory. And I know that my inventory container could be good for that. So inventory container, I'm going to open and select OK. Yeah, that's perfect. So I'm going to click on my inventory container, right click and make scene root. And I can delete the first control. So now we can start from here. We need to remove the script from it. So with this button, detach the script. The title, you can change it for settings. And yeah, so we have the first part, the inventory container. Well, this is going to be the setting list. I guess for the different settings, I could do kind of the same thing. So right click on it, merge from scene. And this time I'm going to get the inventory panel and get this. And yeah, I can detach the script. I'm going to keep the name. I could bring the label up. I'm going to remove the small separator. So this could be the scale. The slot container, I'm not going to need that. So I can delete it. I can duplicate this. Let's change the name, scale, duplicate. And this one will be full screen. All right, so I have my 2 panel. So if let's zoom in a bit. Oh yeah, here I can change the label name for full screen. So in the scale, I'm going to do add child node. I'm going to get the horizontal slider. So this one I can layout, put it H center wide. If I hold Alt, I'm going to scale from both and at the same time. So I'm going to be sure it's centered. I can scale down a bit the container scale, rect 30. Maybe I could move this down a bit and this, let's change the anchor center top. All right, so full screen, layout, center top. And this one will simply be a checkbox. Right click, add a child node, checkbox, add that. And this checkbox, I'm gonna do layout center. All right, I guess I can do the same size. So size 30, let's place that, scale this up. All right, so I have my setting window. I'm gonna save this. I'm gonna put it in my UI. This is gonna be the setting, save that. Now I can set the scale slider. So in my value, the minimum value, I'm gonna put 0.5. The max value, I'm gonna put 1.5. Yeah, 0.1 for the step. Current value will be 1. Now let's start to do the script. So let's change the name of inventory container for settings and attach a new script. Settings, that's okay. I can extend scale control. So now this one will be able to scale when you change also. Create. So in this script, I'm going to need a reference to the scale slider. So to get the reference, I'm going to use this useful one line that I explained in the last part. So if you want to see the explanation in more detail, you can go back and watch it. And yeah, so here I'm going to get my node path for the scale slider. So if I click my settings, if I save, so scale slider is available here, assign, and I get the scale slider. So then I get the node as a H slider when it's ready. And now there's 3 things that I'm gonna need here. So if I go in my UI, I have the full screen, the scale, and the close button. So let's start with the close button. Let's go here, node, pressed, connect that, and just connect. I'm simply gonna hide. So hide. Next, it's gonna be the H slider. Now here I could use value changed, but well, I could show you why it's not a good thing to use this one. So if I select value change, start that and set it. And what I'm gonna do here is simply call, setting manager dot set dot scale. So we're gonna set the scale from the value. So when we set the value here, if I control click scale, it's gonna call set scale. Set scale will call UI scale change, which will come back here and change the scale of the setting itself. So if I start this and I change the scale, so it's changed while I'm moving the slider. So it's not really useful. So that's why instead of using the value change, I'm going to use the GUI input a little bit lower. So connect from this, and I'm going to disconnect the other one, disconnect. So the difference is here I can look at the mouse event instead. I'll check if the event is of type input event mouse button, and it's the left click. So event button index is equal button left, and it's not pressed and not event dot press. So it's only gonna fire when it's released. So then the scale will be applied after setting it. So then we can come here and settings manager dot scale. Now we don't have the value of the scale here, so that's why I need a reference to the slider. So I can call the slider and get its value. So now if we try that, when I change the scale, when I release the mouse, it sets it and then see the results. All right, and the close works. Let's do the full screen now. Full screen, and this one will be toggled, connect. Oh yeah, let's change the name. Let's say I want to change it on scale slider, GUI change, so I can just copy the name of it, go on my slider, and I'm gonna disconnect it, reconnect it, but with this name, and connect. So now it's connected on this one. So for the full screen, what I'm gonna do is simply call the setting manager. Setting manager dot full screen is equal to button press. If you only want to start the current scene, you can simply press F6. And so I'm gonna only start my settings. And if I check full screen, all right, it works. And if I uncheck it, I get out of full screen. Now there's one thing. If you go in your project settings, if you set it to be full screen at start, I need to set the checkbox already. So I'm gonna get a reference to the checkbox. I'm gonna add the function ready. In here, I'm simply gonna do full screen check dot, oh yeah, I need to change this to a checkbox. So this one is pressed from the setting manager dot full screen. When it's ready, it's gonna set the state of the checkbox with the current settings. So since we're getting it from this project settings, it should be all right. Yeah, I forgot to set it. So in settings, my full screen check, click that and set the checkbox. And now when I start, it is already checked. So perfect. All right, let's add this setting in the main scene. So settings and put it there. Now let's add just a quick button to open it to have access to the settings. I'm gonna create a node just to put the buttons in. So buttons, transfer all of those inside. I have my settings button, and now I'm gonna create a node to control a bit my UI here. So add a child node, control, I'm gonna call this one UI container. I'm gonna put it at the root, and I'm gonna put everything inside of it. And then my UI container, I'm gonna make it full rect. So layout, full rect. Now I need to replace a bit those things. All right. Oh, and this is inventory player. Let's rename it. So UI container. I'm going to add a script for that. I'm going to put it in UI like that, create, and I'm going to select my settings button. And when I press it, I'm going to connect that on UI container. And on settings pressed, connect. Again, I'm going to get a reference to the settings UI, and I'm going to get my reference like that. So if I save this and click my UI container, inspector, I have my settings here, so I can assign settings. When I press the button, I'm gonna toggle it. So settings.visible is equal to none. settings visible. So if it is, it's gonna just toggle on and off. And also if the settings is behind a window, I would like it to be over the other. So I'm gonna raise it over the other. So to do that, I'm only gonna call settings.raise. So if I go in my scene here, let's say I have my settings. Oh, it's back here. And let's say it's here behind the inventory. And I hide it. If I start the project, when I click settings, it's gonna be raised over the other one. If I click the X, it's gonna close it, or if I click settings again, it's gonna close it. All right, and I can change the scale, and it's gonna change the scale from the inventory and settings, not the inventory panel, because this one, I didn't change the extend, so it doesn't use the scale control. So now let's go to the next part. I'm gonna add the ability to drag the window around. But before, I'm gonna create a new node in here. I'm gonna place it at the top there, and this is gonna be the windows. And I'm gonna drag all of them inside. All right, so now let's look at the draggable control. So in my UI folder, I'm gonna create a new script. This one will be draggable control, no comments, and it's gonna inherit from the scale control. So yeah, okay, create that, and let's go inside. Okay, so let's start with the variable that we will need, a dragging variable to know if the window is currently being dragged, and for now it's false. We will need a offset, a bit like the item when we click on them, and this is going to be a vector too. Yeah, this one is a boolean. In here, what we're going to do is connect the signal GUI input, and we'll connect it on self, and we'll just call it on GUI input. So now we need to create that function. So function on GUI input. This function will get a event, which is of type input event. Oh yeah, let's set the class name. So class name draggable control. So yeah, for this, I'm gonna create a new action for the left click. So if I go in my project setting, input map, and in here, I'm gonna add a action left click. Add that. So click the little plus, add event, a mouse button, left button, add that. So that's it. Close. I'm gonna do if we're not dragging, and the event is the action pressed, left click. If we left click and we are not already dragging, then we need to get the position of the mouse. Var mouse position is equal to get viewport dot get mouse position. So now we can set the offset. So the offset is equal to the mouse position minus the rect position. Then we can set the dragging to true. So we are dragging the UI. And then what we need to do is get the tree, and we set input as handled. The last thing is when you drag the window, you don't want to drag it behind something else. So we'll raise the window to be always in front of the others. So that's for starting to drag. Then if we want to end the dragging, we only need to check if we are already dragging, and the event is released. So is action released because we let go of the left click. Then we stop dragging. Here we can only set dragging to false. Then we need to set as handled. Now what we need is when we set it to dragging, right now it's not going to move the window. It's simply going to set it to dragging and prepare the offset. So for that, we're going to go and add the function process. And in here, we'll get the rect position is going to be equal to the position of the mouse minus the offset. We can do the same thing as here, get the mouse position minus offset. So that should be it. Oh, wait, I forgot. If you are dragging. So if dragging. So let's set the inventory in the script. So instead of extending 9-patch rect, it's going to extend draggable control. Also, the inventory container here in the mouse option, right now it's on ignore. So I'm going to put it on pass. And I'm going to do it also for the title. So mouse pass. Now, if I start that and I try to drag the inventory, it works. Well, I can open something. If I click on the inventory panel also, because I think the inventory panel are ignore the mouse. So they go through to the inventory, and the title is also draggable. All right, so and it goes over the others. Now the others are not draggable, so let's set them. Player inventory script draggable control. All right, And then the settings, draggable control. Save that. Oh yeah, I forgot I need to change the mouse option. Settings, mouse, pass, title, mouse, pass. Okay, so once I set all the panel to pass for the mouse, they are draggable. And now if I put my setting here, all right, so now I can scale them down, scale them up, and drag them. The only thing I could fix now is when you drag a window, you can drag it outside and then, well, you lose it. So let's add a function to prevent them from disappearing like that. So what I'm gonna add is a safe zone. Export a int var safe zone. And let's set it to 30. So this is gonna be a zone of 30 pixel on each side of the panel. So it will always stay inside the screen. Then I'm gonna need the size of the screen, var screen size, gonna be a type vector2. So then on ready, I can get my screen size. This is gonna be a bit like the mouse. I'm gonna get the viewport, then get visible rect size. So if we look at get visible rect, return the visible rectangle in global screen coordinates. So yeah, that's gonna get us the visible screen size. So now we're not gonna set it directly like that. We're gonna have to clamp the value of the panel. So if I go in the game, let's say I have a 30 pixel on each side and I wanted to move it on the side here and I want to make it block here. And when I go down, it should block there and on this side too. All right, let's try to do that. So I'm gonna create a function that I'm gonna call set pause. And here I'm gonna send the position clamp. So I'm gonna start with the x value, position.x. So now clamp function, the first one is your current position, well, your current value, and then the other one is the minimum and the maximum. The minimum size will be the rect size, but it will be negated, and we'll get the x value. We'll add to that the safe zones. So that's going to be the minimum, so it's going to be a bit more in the negatives because the side of the screen will be 0, but the window itself can go outside. Then the maximum value you can go will be the screen size, x minus the safe zone. And I can repeat that for the y value. Now I can change a rect position here, will come down there, and it's going to be equal to position. I'm going to call set position with the position of the mouse and the offset. So let's say we try that. So yeah, if I get my inventory, move it on the side, it stopped there. I can't go further. Let's try on this side. So if I get the corner and I can't push it further at the bottom, at the top, all right, so it works. Now there's one problem. I can't pick my window back. That's because here in my main, when I added my Windows node, I forgot to set it full rect. Full rect. If you change the size of something before adding the other stuff in, what you can do is just move the stuff out, then set this one to full rect, and then you can put those back in. And now this window needs to get the mouse ignore because it was catching my mouse click. And I could do that for my UI container also. Mouse ignore. And I also have my buttons, mouse filter ignore. All right, so now if I start it and I move something in the corner, I should be able to pick it up. All right, so now the thing is, if let's say I change my scale, yeah, let's make them big, move this in the corner here and scale it down. I still lose it. So the scale is causing a problem. So I'm going to override the set scale function. Since this draggable control extends the scale control, I have access to the scale and set scale and everything like that. So here, I'm going to add my function, set scale, which takes in a value. Now, I don't want to override completely the base function, so I'm going to call it with just dot set scale and pass in the value. When I call this one, this here dot will call the parent set scale. So on set scale here, it will call that one. It will set the scale of the window. And then what I'm going to do is set position, and I'm going to just give it the current position of the window. So rect position. So then it will try to place itself based on the safe zone. Yeah, here instead of getting rect size, I need to get the size but scaled. Var scaled size is going to be equal to my rect size times the scale. And then I can change those for scaled size. All right. Then if I start, let's see if I increase the scale, put it in the corner. All right. And if I scale it down, it stays at the same place. So I don't lose the window. And if I put it there, I can scale it to the max, and it's still available. All right, so that's pretty much it for the scale, the dragging. So now let's modify the player inventory so we can equip some item. So first, I'm gonna go in my managers, and here I'm gonna add a new script, and I want to add the different type of item. So here I'm gonna create a enum. So I'm gonna call it game enums. No comment. All right. And if I go in, I'm gonna create a class name, game enum. All right. Now, well, it doesn't need to extend anything, so I can just remove this. This is just going to be a class name that I can use to have access to my enums everywhere in the game. So enum, equipment type. So yeah, the first will be none. So let's say you have an item that you can't equip it. Then let's have a few: head, chest, main hand, and let's have offhand. All right. And now the next thing we'll do is we'll create a new type of inventory slot to place equipment in it if it's the right type. Oh yeah, now that I placed my button node and window node, when I try to select the window, I always select this node. So I'm gonna click the lock here, so can't be moved, and now I will be able to select the stuff inside. So let's just lock all of those. So now I can click here and not accidentally move them. All right, so player inventory, let's go in. Now this one inherits the inventory container. So I'm gonna change that and make it its own thing. So I'm gonna completely delete it. So close it. I'm gonna go in script. I'm gonna close all of those script. Yeah, inventory, my folder, inventory player tscn. The scene I'm gonna delete, move to trash. Yeah, it's used here in the main scene. I'm gonna remove it in the main scene. Then save everything. And I'm gonna create a new user interface and do like I did for the settings, merge from scene, inventory container, open that, inventory container, all right. So this one will be inventory player, make scene root, delete the basic control, okay, detach the script, and then I can get back my old inventory player script and put it back on. I'd like to have the gear that you can equip, and then let's say 2 pockets. So yeah, the title here, I can change it for players inventory. That's a bit large. Let's change the title size. All right, that should be good. Players inventory. All right, I'm going to merge from scene, and I'm gonna get the inventory module, and I'm gonna import everything, and again, remove the script. So this one will become the equipment. Let's just rename this for equipment. What I'm gonna do here is create a script, but inherit from the inventory module. So equipment GD, here I'm gonna inherit inventory. All right, no comments, create. All right, so inventory. Now, the thing is the inventory module has a size, and when you change this size, it will change the height of the panel itself in the UI, so it scale correctly. So yeah, this function here, set inventory size, I'm simply gonna override the function with the basic value. And back in my equipment script, I'm just gonna put that here. Since I don't call the dot set inventory size, the base one will not be called. The unready function will be called also. So the inventory name will be set unless I move it out of the unready, because the unready function will be called even if you don't call the dot ready, because here I have the ready function. Even if you do dot ready, this is not going to work because it's a built-in function. So everything in ready will be called in the child and parent. So if you don't want it to be called here, well, you can extract that. So let's say I cut that out, set title, and I have another function here, set title. There, I have my function here, and then in the child, so equipment, I should have my function set title to, and not call the parent to override it. I could just get this function, set title, put it there, and pass. And the title wouldn't be set. But I don't really need it since the title is exported in the editor. I can select my equipment and inventory name. I can set it there, equipment. It will just be set there normally. So that's correct. To set the title node, so the title node for the equipment is the label there. Yeah, I'm gonna change the type of this slot container. So change the type for a normal control equipment. Slot container will be this one. All right. Now let's create the new type of equipment slot. So I'm gonna go here and find the inventory slot. TSCN, the scene. I'm gonna right click, new inherited scene, and there we go. So I can rename that for equipment slot. The script I'm gonna remove, and I'm gonna create a new one, create equipment slot, perfect. This is gonna be in UI folder, create. Oh yeah, and it's gonna extend the inventory slot. So here, what I'd like to have is when you see your equipment slot, that you have a placeholder to see what can go in that slot. So a small icon for the helmet or the chest plate, everything like that. Here I'm going to add a child node. I'm going to place a texture rect. All right, so right there, and I'm going to make it full rect, and I'm going to call it placeholder. All right, so in my script here, I'm going to get a reference to it with the node path as texture rect. The slot needs to know which type it is, so we'll export the type. Export the game enums dot equipment type and var type. So with that in the editor, we'll be able to set the type. Now let's get the image for the slot. I'm going to go in my inventory sprite folder. I'm going to import the image, select all of them, import, tab, preset 2D pixel, and re-import. Do not forget that or they'll be blurry. Now I need a reference to those, and I could add those in the item manager. Here when I load the trees, the stone brick, gold, and everything, I'm going to add the placeholder. So on ready, var placeholders is equal to a dictionary, and the key will be the game enums equipment type. And the first one will be head. There's not going to be any for non-head. And then here I'll preload the correct sprite. Let's copy it for the others. Preload. Let's go to my sprites. So head will be this one. All right. And I'll place the other one. Then we need the same function to get the item. We'll get a function get placeholder. We'll pass in the ID, which is going to be a type equipment type. We'll get a ID, and then we'll return it. Placeholders index ID. And since these are resources, you don't need to instantiate them. So that's good. We can save the script here. Save. Let's go back in equipment slot. So on ready, we'll place the texture. So placeholder texture is equal to item manager get placeholder with the type. All right. And now there's some function in the base inventory slot that we need to override. Let's first save those scene. So equipment slot, inventory, save that here. And let's save the player inventory player in inventory. So equipment slot. So if I control click on inventory slot, when you set the item, what we want to do is hide the placeholder. When we pick the item, we want to show it. So what I'm going to do is simply copy all of those functions. I'm going to go back in my equipment slot, and I'm going to paste them here. The first thing I'm going to do is call the parent. So dot set the item, and I'm going to remove the other. This one dot pick item, and here dot put item. And then placeholder hide for the set, and it's going to be the same for the put, and the pick will be show. Okay. So save that. Now we can go back to the player inventory, and let's go in the UI, and we'll add the equipment slot. So inventory, equipment slot TSCN, bring that in there. Oh, first we need to go back inside the equipment slot. I forgot, we need to set the exported variable. So the item container is the inherited one, the gray one, and the placeholder is the new placeholder. The type will set it in the UI, so we can leave it at none. So back in my inventory, if I select my equipment slot, those are already set, and I only have the type to set. So let's say I set it to head. I'm gonna increase the size of my panel. Let's say 70. I'm gonna put this one center top. So this one, I'm gonna change the name for equipment head, then duplicate. Let's do the chest underneath, duplicate. Let's do main hand, move it to the side, duplicate again for the off hand. If you hold control, you can snap to other controls. It might be useful sometimes. All right, so those are set. Oh yeah, I need to set chest, to set the type to chest, main hand, change the type, and offhand, change the type to offhand. Let's see if this works. First, I'm gonna go in my main and put the player inventory back. Player, I'm gonna put it in the windows and move it here. Let's just start like that. Oh yeah, the player inventory needs a inventory. So I'm gonna close the equipment node and inventory container. Yeah, I'm gonna just go here, grab the inventory TSCN and add it. So this could be the left pocket size. Let's make it 5. All right, so inventory player, assign the inventory there and start. I see my equipment in the slot. Okay, so I forgot something in there. Now, when I try to move the windows on the side here, it doesn't work. It stops at the safe zone position. So 30, 30, I cannot move more than that. And this is because in the scale control, when ready, I need to set the scale, because when you start the game, the scale here will be 0 since there's nothing. And we need to get the scale from the scale manager. So set scale, we'll get it from the settings manager. So if, for example, later we save and load the settings, then we'll get the settings that was saved, and all the controls that inherits from scale control will have their scale set. So now if we start, this works again. All right, perfect. All right, so with that, let's go back in the player inventory and we'll modify a bit this part. I will change the inventory here for the left pocket, and let's make one for, let's say, the right pocket if you want to use the module a bit more. So right, then let's scale this to fit everything. So we'll need a reference to all of those. So at the beginning here, let's get everything. All right, so all of those are set, and equipment is inheriting from inventory, so I can use it like that. So now let's set the size of the player inventory based on all of the container. You don't have to. If you want to, let's say, set your panel and let's say have on one side your player model or something like that, and on the side you have your gear, underneath you have your inventory module. You can play around with that pretty easily. So now let's set those inventory. So inventory container, well, the inventory container also is only needed if you want to set the size automatically, so I don't really need it here. So let's remove it from here. Inventory container, remove that. So I'm gonna only have the 3 inventory, assign the right, left pocket, and the equipment. Now in here, in my scene of the inventory player, everything is okay. But if I go back in my main, the panel is not updated the right size. So I could set it manually here, or just delete the player inventory and put it back. Player, put it back in window and move it in position. And start equipment, left pocket, right pocket. And now there's a problem here. When we click an item, we start dragging the inventory. That's because the cell itself is passing the mouse event. So the panel grabs it and start dragging the inventory. If we go in the code, inventory slot TSCN, open that, and we go to the mouse, and yeah, now it's passed. Let's make it stop. So it will catch it and then start. So now we can pick the item and we don't drag the whole inventory. Now we can't put the item anywhere in the equipment. We didn't give the item a equipment type, so let's do that. So we'll go in the item folder. Let's go into item script, so item GD. The only thing we need to do is add the type of the equipment. So export the game enums, equipment type, var equipment type, save that. So now if we go in our data folder, we have all our 4 items. So if we double click the crystal, select the item at the top, and here we have the ID, the item name, and the equipment type. So we can change it. So let's say the crystal goes in the main hand, save that. The gold, let's make it a shield. Stone bricks, could be a chest piece, and the tree is going to be the helm, so head. And start that. Now the problem is the new image we added is over the slot and it's catching the clicks. So if we go to our equipment slot, select the placeholder, and again, mouse, filter, ignore. And the other thing is that in the player inventory, the equipment panel, we need to go in the script, and here we need to get a reference to the equipment slot, so we can send those to the inventory manager. So here at the top, I'm gonna get a reference to those, and on ready, I'm just gonna add them to the slot array. And here at the bottom, we need to call the inventory ready. So I can get it from the main one and bring that back here. Now let's set those node. So equipment, the head, assign. Now let's try if this works. Yeah, now I can place my stuff in the slot, but I can put it anywhere. The placeholder hides itself when I place something, so that's okay. But then let's make it fixed to the correct type. So let's go in the inventory manager on GUI input slot. So that's when you click on the slot. If you have something in your hand, that's the only place you need to check, because if you don't have anything and you want to pick it up, you don't need to check anything. To get if the slot is the correct type. First, we need to know if it's a equipment slot. So I'm going to go in my GD script and I'm going to create a class name, equipment slot. Then I'm going to be able to compare from that. Inventory manager, if the slot is a equipment slot, then we'll need to check if the item in hand, equipment type of this item in hand, we could tell it that it's a type item. So then here we'll be able to use the autocomplete. Item in hand, equipment type is not equal to the slot. If the slot is equipment slot and the item that you have in your hand is not the correct type, then you just return, and that's it. Just this line. Yeah, the brick goes on the chest, so if I try to place it anywhere else, it doesn't work, and on the chest it works. So the tree doesn't go anywhere but the head. The crystal was the weapon, the main hand. All right, and the shield doesn't go here and goes there. All right, so there you go with the equipment. I think that's everything. There's one thing I could fix in the last part of the tutorial. In the item script, I had the pick item and put item. I was changing the filter, but you don't really need to do that because we never click on the item. So it can always be to ignore. So we can simply do ready and set it to ignore. Put item, we can remove that. And then we can go in inventory slot. And when we do item.pick item, we don't need that anymore. Remove this one, put item, we don't need this one. All right, and that's it for this small fix. It's not really a fix, it's just a cleanup. Yeah, and as I go in the future part, if I find any part where I can clean up stuff or upgrade the code so it's better, I'll show you in the next part. And if you find something that could be improved, let me know. I would be really interested to know. If there's stuff that you would do differently, if there's stuff I do that you're not sure why, or you would like to have more explanation, let me know. I'll be happy to help you in the comments below. And maybe if it's something interesting or big, I could add that to a future part. All right, we are done for this part. If you want new functionality, if you're wondering how to modify some stuff to work with your game, let me know. In the next part of the tutorial, I'm going to work on the item. So I'm going to add the affixes, rarity. Maybe I'll take a look at the usable item, but I'll have to check because the rarity and procedurally generating all the item with their stats and everything, it's going to be pretty big. So might be, again, another long video. Thanks for watching. If you want to have the code for the project, there's going to be a link for the GitHub for the first part and the second part in the description. Bye-bye. I'll see you next time, I guess.